Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 19.2 launch week. We're getting to the end here and today's webinar, What is New in Dashboards and Reporting, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist, Paul Usher, and DevExpress CTO, Julian Bucknall. In today's session, Paul and Julian will reveal the new features for dashboards and reporting across all platforms in DevExpress version 19.2. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Julian and Paul.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the penultimate webinar for launch week. It's been quite an exciting week. Hey, Julian.
Hello, Paul, and hello, everybody. Yes, it's been a full jam-packed week, I'd actually say. And yes, today is the last day. Actually, although we're going to have to do the Code Rush one on Monday, but apart from that, yeah, penultimate, we're ready. We're ready to rock and roll with some analytics.
We certainly are. We're going to start out by taking a look at dashboards, and then I'll hand over to you for reporting. One thing that we do just want to mention, obviously, when we get to this part of the presentation, dashboards and reporting are cross-platform. So we're going to be jumping in and out of different products to show some of those things off. And it's probably one of the most taxing set of presentations that we do because there is so much to try and get through and explain. So bear with us as we do jump between WinForms, web, etc.
The other thing to note, I think, is that a lot of this stuff we've done on one platform, and we're asking for feedback whether we should extend it to other platforms. Now, with dashboards and reporting, we have the designers, which can work on one platform, and then the actual dashboard or the report is generated on another platform. We need to know from everybody, need feedback that some of these new features are only available on, say, WinForms, and do we have to migrate them to, say, ASP.NET? If we don't have to migrate them, we can add other features, because obviously we have a fixed size team, we don't have infinite resources and all the rest of it, so we have to plan our future development based upon what our customers require, need, must have right now, and all the rest of it. So we'll be saying this throughout the webinar, I think. Yeah, we need feedback, so please be aware. We send out surveys every now and again, so please respond, let us know.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things, I'm going to be running all the demos from the Dashboard Demos application, which of course is inside the Demo Center. And we're going to start with WinForms and what of the really cool new features that's been brought through to WinForms, and that is asynchronous data processing and rendering. All of the WinForm demos have been updated to utilize this new rendering engine or processing engine. You're not going to really see that much difference in the demos on GoToWebinar, but of course, let's talk about it, why and the benefits. Now, it's an important feature. I mean, just on the WinForms webinar alone, we had a number of people asking about this particular thing. And coming from an application development perspective for desktop, doing asynchronous programming can make a big difference to the responsiveness of your application while people are trying to use it. And it could be that when you're producing dashboards, there's a lot of data to get through. There's a lot of different things going on. And one of the things that the team have come up with this asynchronous processing model is that your UI thread is not going to be blocked while things are happening in the background, especially large aggregations and calculations that may be going on. Note that this new method is not enabled by default because it could require some significant rework depending on how many custom events you're handling or other things. So there is, we want to sort of herd everybody into using the asynchronous model, and for every method that has a standard sync call, there is now an asynchronous version of it. All of the functionality is there. Now, as I mentioned, the team have rewritten the demos inside the demo center to work with full asynchronous mode. What are the benefits? I mean, ultimately, why did we want to go down this path? Well, as I mentioned, we want to keep the heavy lifting away from the UI thread. We want to do things on a background process and have it so that your end users can still navigate their way through your application and not be waiting if a time-consuming operation is in play. Switching to the new async mode is literally as simple as turning on the async mode property. You can end up with more responsive, your widgets are going to render more quickly, and your application is going to feel a lot lighter. It's also a way of accelerating the dashboard data calculations. If you do handle control events, please be aware of the API changes, and because obviously we've had to modify things where the application lifecycle is concerned. Now I'm just going to jump over to the browser. There is a great document available for actually helping you migrate your WinForms dashboard application into the asynchronous mode. So there's the property, and then you can see for every one of the methods that had a sync method, there's the async equivalent. And this simply steps you through all of the things that you need to do to get that happening. Next, while we're talking WinForms, let's look at the new filter editor. I'm going to jump into the designer, and from here I will navigate over to the data source and then filter. And one of the things that you'll notice is that we've actually implemented the easy to read with some skin specific designed labels, so we can see now that everything is rendered, whether it be operators, operands or fields, and they're rendered in different colors, making it really easy to visualize what is going on within the filter. So that's a welcomed change to the editor. I'm going to mix it up a little bit and jump over to the web forms demo right now. Let's launch this one and talk about some things that have changed for web dashboards. First, we'll mention themes. We've added support. I'm going to use the little theme palette over here. We've added support for all of the DevExpress generic themes. Users can now create a custom theme using a CLI or command line interface tool and then modify that theme to suit their application layout of what they want. Now, there's a few things I want to point out here. There is no UI theme builder planned for this. It's all going to be done using the CLI. And then there's a point that we want to raise a discussion on, and you can answer this either in the GoToWebinar panel where you can add your questions, you can email Julian, myself, or the team, but we want to know if you are wanting support for material. So straight off the bat, we've provided full support for all the DevExpress generic themes. We haven't made the decision around material themes. We need to know, are you using them? Give us some scenarios. We want that feedback, because as Julian mentioned, it's important where we put those resources for the next set of sprints. So please, please, can you come back to us with some concepts or some ideas as to what you're doing there. While we're on web, let's talk about localization. Now, if you're using a modular approach such as Angular, Vue, React, then you're probably using something like a globalize or the globalize library to provide localization. Well, within the version 19.2 release, we've added support for the ECMAScript internationalization API. That is now obviously supported by all modern browsers and would make localization more standard, for want of a better word. But if you are using that modular approach, then you will need to explicitly reference the library, and we've got a break and change document available to discuss that in more detail. A feature that I'll show off while I'm in web, but is actually implemented across all platforms, is the new data inspector. And you've got those situations where you've been presenting something in a nice dashboard and the user turns around and says, okay, but I actually want to see what data that's made up of. What is the raw data behind accessories, bikes, whatever it is. So we've now introduced a data inspector. You'll see a new icon, which is this little magnifying glass over list, and that can be turned on or off at your discretion on any of the widgets. In essence, when you click on the icon, you're going to get this pop-up, and again, this is cross-platform, so if you're using WinForms, you're going to get the WinForms version of this, but you can then see the raw data in both aggregated format and raw format. So you've now got a very nice, clear way of actually breaking that down and looking at what data is sitting behind there. For the next one, I'm going to jump back into WinForms and show you a couple of things to do with the editor, and in particular, a feature that when you try and break it down, it can be a little, I don't know, maybe daunting is not the right word, Julian, but advanced to discuss, and that's to do with this thing called window calculations. Now, you may not know, but back in 2016, we introduced a feature called window calculations, and it was a way of easily displaying moving averages, totals across a subset of data that you might already be filtering. And in that space, we started adding some functions around that. It's not a hugely or widely used feature. I think in some cases people aren't even aware that it exists. But for those that have used it, it's become quite important, and the team have extended it even further. So much so that we now have a new set of window functions for that particular scenario. So I'm going to come into the editor, I'm going to come down to this particular example and say last end month product sales. And when I edit the expression, you can now see that there's this W function, I'm just going to hover my mouth, which provides the aggregated calculation over a specified window function. It's basically allowing you to compare certain slices of data within your set data set. And as I mentioned, it is a very powerful tool. We've got a great set of documents on the documentation page explaining it, but it also gives a great segue into showing you another feature that's available inside the expression editor. Something, I suppose, as a SQL developer I've often enjoyed is the fact that you can break things down across lines to make expressions or queries a lot easier to read, and you can now do that inside the expression editor. We've added full support for lines, line breaks, as well as spaces. So in this instance, it may be that I want to break down and make it a little bit easier to see what's going on inside this function. So here I can just come through and add that separated space like so. And of course, we've got the color coding and syntax, which makes it really easy to start working on more complex and complicated expressions. So that's the line break spaces in calculated fields. Let's talk federated data for a second. And I know that it was only a release or a couple releases ago that we added support for the federated data source. Again, what I'm going to do is jump into the data federation demo, but into the designer, bring this up and move across to the data source. We're going to go, oh, well, the feature that I want is not here. Don't get caught with that because I've got multiple data sources. I'm going to choose my federation or federated data source, and we get the extra options. If I edit this query, I can now see that I can actually combine or use a union or a union all join within my data sets. So that's available directly inside the query builder, but just as importantly, you can use the API to create a lot more complex queries when you're binding those data sources and performing join operations. And again, you can use the union or union all, which is something obviously that people have been asking for. Talking of data sources, you can now utilize we've extended the extract data source API to make it easier to update your extract file. And think in terms of concurrent users on a web where you might have previously had to mess around making sure that the file could be replaced, renewed, all those sorts of things. And in version 19.2, we've included a really straightforward API to actually do this. Now, behind the scenes, the data requests are redirected to a new file. We then take care of deleting the old file when it's no longer necessary. And that entire operation becomes seamless, meaning that you don't have to worry about any additional thread synchronization, and that all of the processing is happening behind the scenes for you at that level. We've also got the JSON data source, which allows you to set up a JSON feed for the dashboard, and this is applied across all platforms. So end users can create a JSON data source with the data source wizard, which of course is available directly within the WinForms designer and the web dashboard. Now, once you set up your JSON data source, you set the support for different authentication methods, and you can also use the API to access it via the dashboard JSON data source class. Now, for those of you that are users and big fans of XPO, we have now added support for the XPO data source. You can bind your XPO business model directly to a DevExpress dashboard, and you can do that as simple as using the WinForms dashboard wizard. And of course, you can also instantiate the dashboard XPO data source directly in your source code and set the storage, which makes it really, really powerful. Now, I know that some of the things that I've mentioned here also apply to reporting. So there's some cross-pollination, as Julian mentioned, with some of those things. And with that said, we may switch over to Julian to share some of the reporting goodness.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me just grab the presenter option here and show my screen. There we go. Yes, I'm going to be talking about reporting. And as Paul mentioned earlier on, reporting obviously covers many platforms. I'm primarily going to be concentrating in a visual sense on the WinForms reporting side of things, and I'll jump over to ASP.NET if and when I need to. The very first thing then, let's jump into some demos. And the first demo I want to show is our new Crosstab control. We have a new Crosstab report control, which is going to or has replaced the old pivot grid report control. It's just way easier to set up for the majority of cases than using the pivot grid. Now, when designing a report, the Crosstab control is currently only available for those using our Visual Studio Report Designer and our WinForms end user report designer. We shall be adding support for it with our web and WPF report designers sometime in the future. Nevertheless, if you create a report template with WinForms, the WinForms designer, it can render just fine in the browser and in WPF applications. So it's all about the designer side of things, where you can design with the Crosstab control, but you can use it in a completed report template across the board, across all of our platforms that we use. So what we tried to do here is to resolve the limitations which were associated with our pivot grid report control and make it essentially code-free to create this kind of cross-tab reporting. It, as I said, render in any application, no matter desktop or the web. You can easily migrate if you already have a pivot grid report control inside one of your templates or several of your templates. We've added the option to basically click on that pivot grid report control, and there's an option there to actually convert it into a crosstab control. So here we have the balance sheet. Let me just jump into the designer here. Just while this is happening, it's very unlikely that we're going to extend the pivot grid report control in the future. It's, shall we say, difficult to use, and we can provide better functionality with the Crosstab. So we're just going to basically focus our efforts over there. We're not removing the pivot grid report control. No. All I'm saying is it's unlikely that it's going to be enhanced much in the future. So here we are. Let's show the detail line here, and here's the Crosstab control itself in the designer. There are a couple of things to notice here. One is, we have some hatching going on here. What's this all about? And this is a feature for the Crosstab control, whereby you can mark a row or a column as being hidden or not hidden. So if I select this, for example, and I jump over here on the properties panel, we have this ability. This grand total thing here is a row, and at the moment it's hidden. So if I click it and then I run the preview and I jump down to the bottom, oh, here it is. The grand total is now shown as part of the report, whereas before it was not shown. So there is that ability to hide or not hide rows, and ditto the same with columns. So with columns, column here is not visible. Yes, it's visible as part of the row, but if I show it, notice the hatching disappears on the column. So row visibility and column visibility, an important feature of the Crosstab report. The other thing to notice here while we're here is the option, or not options, this little box here basically shows whether you're using the default value or you've changed it in some sense. The default here would be, oh, let's reset it, would be to show the column essentially, and the default. This is mostly important with regard to the web side of things, as we've added it to the web as well, and I'll be showing you that in a moment. There's lots of data binding and formatting options to do with the Crosstab report, ditto layout options. The best bet here is for you to have a look at what's new pages, to look at what they are and how they're used and all the rest of it. Documentation again, it will detail them rather than me trying to show you here. Let me just jump over to the ASP.NET where it is. No, never mind. Not thinking. Next big feature is the crossband content. So let me come out of this for now and jump over to the crossband content. So we have this preview here. Let me just grow this a little bit. There we go. So we have this preview here. What we have is essentially a side panel here, which shows it's not data driven per se from the actual data, perhaps. It's going to be constant. It's like a header, but it's not a header, it's on the side, because headers we think is going along top. So this is a header, if you like. But the interesting thing is it's actually shown inside the designer as a header feature. So let me just show you this. So what we're showing here is the report itself, and at the top here we have another group header, and it's just the panel that's going to appear on the side. Now what's actually going to happen when the report is rendered is this header is going to be printed first, or rendered first I should say, and then the rest of the report is going to be rendered. But notice how the rest of the report does not overflow on that area which is going to be occupied by this header. So in other words, we're rendering, quote unquote, over the top of this particular header. So this is what we're calling a crossband content type report, where the bands are being printed over the top of each other, but we're making sure that something's not going to be messing around with that which has already been rendered. So that's the crossband feature. And so that's fun. What else have we got? Oh, yes. I showed you earlier on the reset option. So let me just jump over here. I don't think I've got it. Oh, here we have. So if I click on this here, I have a reset option that I can set that particular property to its default. Next thing I want to talk about is, oh yeah, let me just show you the preview again. Notice of the items in this particular report, there are only 3 items which are there in my data source. The rest of them are just there to help you maybe print on or render on pre-printed forms, for example. So we're calling this the empty space feature. We're basically saying, okay, we have 3 which are really there, and then the rest of these, from 4 to 14, we're just rendering as empty space. So if I go back to the designer here and click on the detail panel, and I go here, whoops, I didn't click on the detail panel. There we are. We have this new option called fill empty space. If I turn that off and then we re-preview this, what you'll see is all those nice lines which I managed to fill in before have all disappeared, so we're just left with some white space. So that may be a feature that is handy for you. So we're just showing blank space there, and here we're once I go back, I can refill it with, if you like, the line numbers of that particular invoice. Excuse me. Next thing I want to show is a change to our parameters. So here we have our parameter list for this particular report. We only have 1 parameter. I'm going to add another parameter here. So let's add a parameter. This has changed slightly, this particular dialog. And I'm going to leave these well-formed names. And I'm going to make it a date. Now, the interesting thing is here, what we've done is to add the ability to specify a range. So we now have a new option here called range value. And when I click it, everything else basically disappears. They're no longer needed. And what this gives me the ability to do is to create a parameter, a date parameter, which is actually a date range. So let me just click OK on that. So here's that new well-named parameter, and it has a value of some rubbish here, but I can click on this and I can say, well, let's make it from, let's say, September the 1st through to October the 1st. And so I have now this parameter which shows, basically that month. And I can specify them individually if I so wish. So here's the end parameter and the start parameter. What the new feature is the ability to set a range. At the moment, we've only implemented it for dates. And this is yet another one of those points where I put up my hand and say, we need feedback from people. If we did have this ability to create a parameter which is a range, what other types would you apply it to? Date, yeah, fairly obvious. Numbers, yeah, also fairly obvious. I can imagine, saying, oh, it's a percentage in this particular column. Let's say I want between 50 and 75%. So yes, I can imagine a numeric range. I can't imagine a Boolean range, but and a GUID range would be quite ridiculous. But string, I don't know. String, all the A's and B's, maybe? Don't know. So what we need now is a bit of feedback. Yes, we have a range feature. It's a date range only at the moment, but let us know if you need any other ranges available. Next thing I want to quickly show you is the filter editor. Just like Paul showed you with the dashboards, we now have the filter string editor as being color-coded as well. So we have different colors for operands and operators and values and all the rest. It gives you a much better way of understanding what's going on as you add more features. Begins with an A. So that's, as you can see down here, the filter expression is also color-coded as well. And that's another great feature for reporting. What else have we got down here? Now, a highly demanded feature that has prevented our users from migrating to .NET Core is that they have a lot of reports where the scripts are stored in a database. What we've done now is to add a feature whereby you can use Roslyn to emit an assembly with report scripts at runtime. That's one of the new features for .NET Core. We have the ability to reorder detail reports in the Report Explorer. The enhanced filter editor that I'm showing here is available for WPF and WinForms. It's not available for ASP.NET yet. There are filtering enhancements for the charting report control. Both Crosstab and Chart now provide similar filtering experiences. The properties panel, yes, let me just cancel out of that. Can't show you this, but I can tell you what it is here we have a tabbed aspect to the properties panel, so I can click on the tabs and get the properties which are related to whichever tab I'm opening up at the moment. What we've done is to basically turn off the tabbing across the top here and create a tree list of all the properties instead. So instead of having this particular tab, then you have to remember where things are. But then again, empty. Where's empty? So yeah, we have all these different varieties where empty appears. So there is that ability to set the designer or the properties panel into a non-tabbed view on the WinForms side of things. So you can search and group properties, via categories using that. Next one, I'm going to jump over to our ASP.NET Designer now. So let me jump over to that. Here we have a mail merge type report from DevExpress University. And yes, it's a fun little thing, nice little demo and all the rest of it. The interesting thing here is we've added to the web report designer. So let me just jump into the designer here. We have now an in-place editor for the rich text report control. So let me bring up, here we are. And here's a rich text, there we are, a rich text control, report control. And what I can do now is, if I double click here, I get a nice toolbar, hovering toolbar, and the ability then to edit the data in the rich text, in other words, the text, inside the designer. So, oh, look, I've made a mistake. I put it as DevExpress instead of Express. So let me highlight that and type in DevExpress University, I think that ought to be like, it should be bold, and we should set it to something big to make it really obvious that we're talking about the DevExpress University. Brilliant, fantastic. Now let's jump over, have a look at the preview. And there we go. It's a nice feature there where you can edit your rich text inside your rich text report control directly, together with the toolbar to, enhance bits and pieces of it, and so on and so forth. JSON data source, path parameter support, available only at runtime at the moment. We haven't quite integrated inside the designers yet. Excuse me. And also, no, I've lost that particular segment. But that's essentially it visually for the reporting side of things within our universal product. Next up, I quickly go to talk about the report and dashboard servers. First thing, we now provide Docker images hosted in a Docker hub so that people can quickly and easily start using the report or dashboard server. We had a lot of tickets related to the Windows system configuration with ISS related issues and so on and so forth. You don't have to worry about it anymore. There's a Docker image with it all set up. At the moment, we're providing Windows only images. And we're debating, shall we say, whether to release Linux-based images as well. So again, another feedback point. Is it okay to have your report server or your dashboard server as a Windows-based image in your Docker image? Or do you want Linux-based ones? So let us know. And we're getting closer to provide report and dashboard servers as ready-to-use backend, BI backend for those customers who do not want to implement everything like security and user roles and document management. So essentially, it's an export API now to make a web API call to get an exported document. So a couple of big things happening with the server side of things. And on that particular point, I think it's time for any questions.
There have been tons of questions, Julian.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
But the team have been busy answering them as they go. So let's just cover some of the ones that would be relevant for everybody listening. Can you move the color scheme selection to the UI or end user? And of course, you can provide support to your end users. We have a ticket in the support center for being able to do just that. So if you are interested, you can look that up in the support center. We have got a number of people on that are using the window calculations. So that's been great.
Excellent.
Can we use dynamic arguments in charts? And now this one's a little complicated as far as it's not a straight answer. Depending on what you're wanting to do, there are a number of different ways to handle data at an aggregate. We do have a model API which allows you to do a number of things as well. So I suppose the number one thing here is going to be, if you've got edge cases or you've got specific things, the support center is there so that the team can help you. It's not just oh, I've got a bug, but the team want active feedback to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is the way I think I'm trying to do it. And it could be that there's a different, more optimal way, or that they need to pass it on to the research and development team to incorporate. Right. One of the big questions is, do we have a dashboard designer or report designer for WPF?
Oh, yeah.
Now, we don't have a dashboard designer for WPF. and we are still gathering feedback from everybody as to whether that would be, sort of a requirement. Obviously, you can embed the WinForms component in a WPF application. That's easy enough to do. And then all the WPF people are screaming at me right now saying, I don't want to do that. But the team obviously want to hear from you regarding what's going on, and that's the dashboard designer. Well, obviously we have the report designer support.
Report designer for WPF, and here it is. I just brought it up right now.
But not dashboard.
No, not dashboard. I didn't have that screen up. Go
on. Question came in, do we have any plans to introduce heat maps or the heat map control in dashboards? It's not on our current foreseeable list. However, it can be done using custom item functionality. What else do we have? Can the data from the data inspector or data from the data inspector, depending where you're from, be exported? And yes, it can be exported. It's actually enabled by default on WinForms and WPF. It's just not enabled by default on web because it requires some third-party libraries, and it is something that we're looking to introduce or create an example for. And if you want more information on that, jump in, create a ticket, and it will be linked to a tracker for when that is available. We have a licensing question regarding what's included. So for example, are dashboards included in DExperience? No. The reporting components are included as part of a DExperience subscription. The dashboard are only provided as part of Universal.
Essentially, if you go to DevExpress.com, even spell it right, unlike I can, and the products, and where are we? Is it under buy? I can't remember. I can never remember. Oh, here we are. Yes. So what we see here is the subscriptions you can buy and what's included in them. So reporting, yes, we have reporting across WinForms, WPF, and ASP.NET. But when we're talking about dashboards, where's dashboards? Office API complete, visualization dashboard. I don't want to click on it. You can tell I haven't rehearsed this bit. It's only available in the big one, the universal version. So by all means, go to devexpress.com/buy/net or whatever, and you can see what's included in what version of our subscriptions.
Another question came in, is the date range control available in all platforms or just WinForms? It's available in all platforms. And obviously most of the functionality there is. Good morning, Kirsten. Kirsten, one of our lovely Australian clients, does some phenomenal work across all the platforms. Asking about the use, you mentioned Roslyn, you mentioned emitting assemblies. So just to be clear, the report scripts for .NET Core currently require the Microsoft Code Analysis NuGet package to actually utilize that. So again, support center for specific details, but when you start mentioning Roslyn, that's what we're talking about. It requires that emission to be happening under there. Conditional formatting, do we have any plans for customized icons, etc.? Not this stage, but again, this is one of the things we love is seeing what people are actually wanting to use. When will we have dashboard and reports for Blazor? And of course, there is actually already a sample of a single wrapper that allows you to use the dashboard and reports in your Blazor app. However, we are still discussing the requirements and practicalities of creating native Blazor reports and dashboard controls. but because obviously we have the HTML versions of them, you can utilize it right now. Can margins be modified, or can users modify margins before printing? So interactive margins displayed on the desktop document viewers, and the end user can drag them to change, but not currently on the web viewer. There's still a couple of questions in there that the team are working their way through, so if your question didn't get raised, then we will get back to you on that. But the key thing here, add a ticket to Support Center with your use case. The teams, it's not just a matter of one guy picking up a ticket and going, if. The teams are very, very active. There's a lot of analysis goes on behind the scenes on the tickets as to features that should be included. And trust me, especially being part of the internal mailing list, there's a lot of discussion goes on about a lot of this stuff. So it's a very active topic every time a ticket is created for new features. And with that, maybe we can see if Amanda is still around.
Like we mentioned before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. I posted the link to the channel in the chat box. We have one more launch webinar coming up today at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on our Office File API. I've been told it's going to be a short and sweet one, so if you're interested in hearing about it, visit devexpress.com/webinars to register. And that is it for this one. Thanks to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress. Welcome to 19.2 Launch Week and today's webinar, What's New in Office File API, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher and DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall. In today's session, Paul and Julian will reveal the new features for Office File API in DevExpress version 19.2. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning once again. Welcome to what is our final webinar for the week, Julian.
Indeed, thank you, and welcome everybody. Yes, Paul and I have now done 3 webinars, and this is our 4th of the week, and we're ready for the weekend, I think.
Yes, indeed, although it has started. The sun's coming up. It's going to be Now, Office File API. A couple of things I want to just bring to the front before we jump into it. First and foremost, obviously, we are talking non-visual. So for a company that specializes in UI and visualization components, we're talking to them now about the backend engine. And the team do an amazing job on this, being able to do some of this stuff without having to worry about the user interface where you can open up spreadsheets or Word documents or PDF documents and interact with them at a really cool low level is certainly an amazing set of features that the team provides. So kudos to them, and a warning that some of the stuff we're doing today is going to be more related to looking at documentation and talking about some of the features that have been added.
And the other thing to note is because it's an API, in other words, some kind of core library, it's available across all of our platforms. So we're not necessarily just talking about, oh, this particular bit of code is only available in WinForms or whatever it happens to be. This is across all of our platforms.
We can see on screen that we've got a number of things to cover, everything from .NET Core, which has been one of the big things we've talked about all week, and then the different document APIs that we have available. To start with, though, I want to talk about .NET Core, in particular because there's some important aspects to think as to which version of our library you need to use depending on your application type. Here I am looking at the document center at devexpress.com, and we can see first of all that it's really easy to switch between what library contains what functionality by changing the version in this top left hand corner. When it comes to .NET Core, there's a couple of things you need to consider. If you're targeting web, you need to be looking for .NET Core 2, which, when I say web, you're thinking in terms of also being able to run it under Linux and Mac, or a Unix-based operating system, and this includes any of the Docker images. Now, with that, 19.2 adds support for the ability to embed fonts directly into your PDF files under the Linux file system, and then adds support for both Windows and Linux. And of course, when I say Linux, I'm covering the other major operating system, but Linux core, and that is the ability to, or support for complex text layout. And that covers both our word processing document API and the PDF document API. You can now also export to PDF documents that use right to left or RTL languages, so Arabic, Hebrew, and any other language that uses right to left. Now, with the support for the Unix style or Unix-like operating systems, there are some restrictions, and that's due to the fact that there is no GDI library available in that environment. Whereas if you're targeting a Windows end product, then all the functionality is available. When we talk about .NET Core 3, what we're really mentioning is support for desktop projects. So unlike .NET Core 2, think of it as web, .NET Core 3 support is for desktop platforms. And it's completely the same version or set of functionality inside that you'd find in the regular .NET framework. So of course, we also have the Office File API library for .NET 4.5 all the way up to the latest. So really, I just want to point out that you need to be thinking about which of the libraries you need to suit your needs the best. Let's now take a quick look at the PDF library. One of the key things that's been added to version 19.2 is the ability to work with custom properties. Now, I did actually have the page ready for custom properties. Here we're talking about you can modify a document's custom collection or custom property collection. It's available through the PDF document namespace custom properties collection, and with this you can actually add, you can remove or edit any existing properties or add new properties in there and change the associated values as needed. And of course, simple little example up on screen. Julian and I were debating a little earlier as to who actually still requires TIFF support. So apparently quite a number of you do, and in this release we've now added support for CCITT, both T.4 and T.6 TIFF support. So you can embed those images directly within your PDF document. Next we have the spreadsheet control. Well, sorry, the Spreadsheet API, document API. And if you've been on any presentations during this week, you might have seen some of these things as well, but we've now added support for the Excel binary workbook, so the XLSB file type, which otherwise known as BIF12. You can now, using the API, as well as the visual components, you can load and save documents using XLSB file format. And in addition, we've added support for BIF5, which is back to the Excel 5.0 or Excel 95 document layouts. And with that one, we've added the ability to read or import documents with that particular file format. Another feature for the spreadsheet is the ability to export individual sheets. So it's not a matter of now just exporting and having everything. We've added an override or an overload into the export PDF method, which allows you to specify the sheet name that you want to see in that particular export. And from a performance perspective, we've added asynchronous methods to load, save, and export. So you've now got, for example, load document async, save document async, that will provide that asynchronous call. And then finally for spreadsheet, we've added or enhanced the column width calculation for printed workbooks. So this basically calculates the column widths more accurately, mirroring more of what you find inside Microsoft Excel. There is a note that this particular feature will only work when you have your spreadsheet layout engine, when you've actually got the layout engine set to the new version. So if you're using a legacy mode, then you won't have that support. Now to the word processing document API. I'm going to jump over to one of the other presentations we did during the week, and I'm just going to utilize the WinForms demo. We added support for hyphenation, both soft hyphenation and user hyphenation. When it was actually released, we were still working through which dictionaries we could actually ship without obviously complicating end user license agreements. I'm just going to show you a quick example here using track changes. I come in and make some changes. We can see that what's happening here, you can now access this directly within the API. You can retrieve, you can accept, or you can actually reject the revisions made when somebody's using that particular feature. So that can be handy for, well, a number of different scenarios I could think of, especially things such as document version control. And then one that doesn't really affect the API that much because you don't need to do anything with it, but we've added support for theme fonts. And that's important for people that are using non-standard fonts such as Asian fonts, etc. It's all now wrapped up inside that library. Anything you want to add, Julian?
I just want to add a quick extra note to the hyphenation aspect of the API. When we released version 19.2, we didn't have access to a dictionary with some hyphenation rules. And so our demos don't actually show hyphenation and all the rest of it. We basically did our testing with a purchased dictionary, which we obviously can't ship. Since then, lo and behold, we've managed to find an open source dictionary with hyphenation rules, so you should be able to, in a very soon minor version, be able to show off or to have a look at the hyphenation aspects of A, the UI in WinForms and WPF, and B, be able to use it within the API for your word processing application.
Excellent. Now, in terms of questions, there's not been much come through. So one of the things that we did talk about was maybe appending this short presentation to the rest of the visualization and analytics suite.
Indeed. So, Amanda.
Hi, guys. All right. And that is it for this one and for 19.2 launch week. Thank you to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.